Hi everyone, welcome to the Wharton School quanti quantitative modeling transcripts. I've downloaded them from their course website, so thanks for watching. So now that we have had a look at, we understand that a quantitative model is about, let me tell you some of the specific activities where these models are used. So one thing that we can do once we have got a quantitative model is prediction. And prediction is basically taking the model, putting in an input and calculating the output. And so going back to diamond rings, example, what I mean by prediction, what's the expected price of a diamond ring that weighs zero point 0.2 of a carats? If I got a model, I can create that prediction. And certainly one of the most often used places for this quantitative model is that is what we call predictive analytics. And so if you want to do predictive analytics, you need some underlying model for the process. Typically another place that we use these models is in forecasting. And when I'm talking about forecasting, I'm really thinking about a time series. I'm thinking about trying to make a comment about what's happening in the future. And so forecasting is an activity that most businesses and entities go through at some stage, often to do with resource planning. And going back to the example of the epidemic, if one was involved in a public health situation, a key question that that you would be asking, for example, would be how many people are expected to be infected in 6 weeks' time, because that's the answer. The answer to that sort of question is going to help in terms of resource planning. Here's another forecasting type problem where quantitative models can be very useful. So imagine that you are running a hospital and you're trying to schedule a patient for appointments. One of the truths of the matter here is that not everybody shows up for the appointment, and that leads to inefficiency in the system. The system could be improved if we had a sense of who was likely to not show up, and perhaps we could tweak the schedule as a result of that. And so that would be another example where we would like to do some forecasting. Forecasting whether or not someone's likely to show up for an appointment. Another activity that we use these quantity model for is optimization, and so optimization takes up a lot of business thinking. And the example that I have got here is a demand and price. And so it's a very legitimate question to ask. I wonder what price is going to maximize the profit, and the keyword there is maximize. That's to optimize an output. The profit and optimization activities are going to typically require an underlying quantitative model, and so that's one of the places where quantitative models go to work as inputs of our optimization, trying to make your business as good as it can be, optimizing price. Optimizing price. Okay. Uh, so I wonder what the price is going to maximize okay. So I wonder what price is going to maximize the profit, and the key word there is to maximize. That's to optimize an output. The profit and optimization activities are going to typically require an underlying quantitative model, and so that's one of the places where quantitative models go to work as inputs to optimization, trying to make your business model as it can be optimizing price, optimizing the supply chain, etc. So we use models for optimization, and another activity that we go through, and models help us our ranking and targeting. And so what I mean there is that we are often looking at a list. It might be customers or it might be diamonds, for example, and we would like to have a look at these diamonds perhaps and figure out which ones we would be interested in purchasing if we are a diamond merchant, for example. And so I can look at the diamonds that are out there in the world, because I simply don't have the resources. And so that's the idea of given limited resources, it would be really nice if I could identify potential targets of opportunity, and that essentially is the ranking and targeting exercise. And if we have a model, we can create a set of predictions, we can sort these predictions, and that creates a ranking, and then we can work our way down the list of predictions in order there and the rank list in order to optimize our own time. And so another example would be that I'm interested in real estate and I'm considering potential properties to buy. There are millions of properties potentials for sale in the country at any one point in time. I don't have an opportunity to look at all of them, but be nice if I could create a model that would help me identify these properties that seem uh, that are of more interest to me, and that's something that a model can help you do. Here are some more things that we can use our quantitative models for. What if scenario planning? We will often like to understand what might happen to the world if certain things change. And so going back to the epidemic, we might want to ask ourselves the question, well, what if the growth rate change, and chain increase to 20% per week, then how many infections are we going to expect in the next 10 weeks? So if we have a model, we are able to examine the consequences of the change of some of our assumptions. And that's the idea of scenario planning and what if analysis. So that's something else that a model can help you do. Certain models lend themselves to interpretation, and in terms of the price and quantity demanded model, there was a coefficient in the equation. If you look back, and that coefficient was the power, which was minus 2.5. So it's a number, but sometimes these coefficients have interpretations, and the interpretation can be helpful. It turns out that interpretation of that minus 2.5 is what's known as an elasticity, and it tells us that price goes up by 1%, and we can anticipate the demand to fall by 2.5%. So that's what I mean by interpreting a coefficient in a model, and that can give us additional insight and help us explain a model uh, to other people. So our model is involve mathematical equation. The mathematical equations often have coefficient in them. The coefficients have real meaning and interpretation. Another task that models are used for is the conduct a sensitivity analysis. And so I pointed out earlier on that pretty much every model you create is going to rely on some assumption. And sensitivity analysis is a process where we look to see how sensitive the outputs of the models are to some of these assumptions. If we find that the model that's particularly sensitive to an assumption, then that's tell us that we need to think a little more carefully about the assumption. Maybe we will try and confirm that this assumption is realistic, or collect more information to try and tie that assumption down more precisely. So there is a sensitivity analysis typically with a model that helps us figure out which of the assumptions are really important and which are not so important, and therefore how we might want to use our time in confirming that underlying assumptions are reasonable after having gone through this whole modeling business. Hopefully there are some benefits, and here I have listed out a set of benefits. There are undoubtedly more than up here on this slide, but these are the benefits that I think and have experienced myself after having gone through this modeling activity. So one of the things that can be the outcome of a model is the identification that there's some gaps in the current understanding. You have tried to lay out your understanding of the business process, and there's just some big gap sitting there in the middle of, and that's only became apparent because you have taken the time to lay out your current understanding. So identifying gaps is certainly a benefit. It's often the case that people are using models without having more made underlying assumption explicit, and so one of the benefits of creating a useful model is that you'll have explicated what those assumptions are, so they are on the table, everybody can see what you're assuming as you come with your recommendation from that model. And sometimes these assumptions have been implicitly formed, not everyone is aware of them, and so explicating the assumption can be very useful. You'll also have at the end of the modeling process a well-defined description of the business process, how the pieces fit together, and it can benefit its own rights. Fourth one I have got here isn't entirely obvious, but one of the things a model can do is to create what I call an institutional memory. So many businesses will have some smart person who is relied on for doing certain things, certain forecasting activity. What do you think we are going to sell next month? They are someone who has asked for the company 25 years. You go to them, they have a good sense of what's going on, but what happens if that person leaves? Knowledge goes with them, and so you can think of a model as a creating institutional memory, because that model is going to be a set of equations or a set of inputs and outputs, and that's going to stick around beyond any individual. So I think models can be useful from the point of view. Ultimately the model is going to be used as a decision support tool, and that I have bolded the word support here because it's a little naive to think that the model is going to reveal truth. They're always approximation, and the model is typically going to be used as one of the suite of tools to help support the decision making within a company. And so it's very much not in its own right, but a support in other activities. My final comment here is that sometimes I think that models are serendipitous insight generators. By going through the modeling process, you learn something that you had not thought about at all, something very unexpected, and that happens quite often. And so that's another benefit of modeling. So thanks for watching, guys.